Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Erdley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Hello, it's me, Catherine Erdley, founder of the Resilient Retail Club, and you are listening to episode number 95 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. First of all, I have to start with a confession because I think that I got my podcast scheduling mixed up, and the last episode that I recorded, I said that if you were listening to it on the day that it was released, that you were listening to it on my birthday, and that was a mistake. That was actually last week's episode. So if you are listening to this episode on the day that it was released, the 26th of May, that is my actual birthday. And I don't know why I feel the need to apologize for that, but I thought I'd be clear. It just made me laugh when I realized I'd got myself mixed up. So today's episode, since it is going out on my birthday, I was thinking about what I wanted this episode to be, and I wanted it to be a little bit more reflective, and I also wanted to basically give a bit of a pep talk because I speak to product businesses all day long. I speak to them as one-to-one clients, strategy work that I do with people, or some of my ongoing mentoring clients, some of which I've worked with for, a couple of years now. And I also, in the Resilient Retail Club, every day in the group, our Facebook group, and I'm answering questions and I'm seeing what people are saying. I'm having private conversations with people as well that I've got to know over the time. So even if I'm not working with them in a professional capacity, then I'm chatting with them in the DMs on Instagram or on WhatsApp. Or a couple of weeks ago, I was at the London Stationery Show, for example. So I met a lot of people there face to face and in person. And as a result, I spend almost all day, every day, talking to people who run product businesses. And simultaneously, I read a lot of research about the retail industry. I do a lot of writing for Forbes. I do talks within other groups as well. So I'm pretty much always having conversations with people running their own business. And this is all against a background of a very challenging year in 2022. I know I've talked about this in previous podcasts, but it has been a really tough year. And I think that what I hear a lot, again, also in the club, we have Ask Me Anything sessions, so people submit their questions. And at some point somewhere, I definitely hear people coming up with questions over and over again about what's happening, how it's so hard right now. Several people saying that they've seen their sales drop off. I've actually spoken to several people who saw huge growth in 2020. It was almost like unbelievable growth. And then they've seen it really decline in 2021, and they've seen it decline again in 2022. So there were just a few things that I often end up saying to people. And I thought to myself, maybe for today's episode, I would kind of pull together the conversations that I've been having, summarize them, and effectively what I'm hoping is going to be a bit of a pep talk. And by pep talk, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's lots of things I could share about my thoughts about toxic positivity, where people sort of always are like, oh, you got to look on the bright side. I think that it's important to recognize the challenges that people have, but I think it's also important to challenge ourselves a little bit about what we're believing at the moment. So when I say a pep talk, I don't mean to be flippant, and I never underestimate the stress that it puts people through when sales are tough. And I never underestimate the fact that this has been, it's a really extraordinary time. It has been the highest inflation for many years. If you look at, I was looking at the most recent inflation figures, and they are up again. And we're not really sure where that's going to end. Lots of people having conversations So in my personal life outside of running the business, a lot of the conversations that I'm having with people are about the cost of living and the cost of energy and the cost of everything going up and the cost of bills. So it is definitely something that's on everybody's mind. And I definitely, when I say a pep talk, I definitely don't want to put any of that, I don't want to underestimate any of that and the impact that it's having on people, because it is clear and it is real and it is happening. However, all of that said, one of the first things that I wanted to start off by saying is that sometimes we have this thing that we do, which is when we tell ourselves something, and then when we're in our echo chamber, we all have a bit of an echo chamber, and when we're in our social media groups or talking to small business friends, then you kind of end up saying the same thing to each other, and it begins to feel like everyone's saying the same thing. So I think it's worthwhile to step back every so often and just challenge what you're telling yourself. And the thing that I would challenge people is this notion that nobody's buying anything anymore and sales have just completely dropped off. And people will tell me this all the time. They'll say, oh, e-commerce is really, nobody's buying online anymore. Or they'll tell me, people just aren't spending. The truth is that actually, if you look at the latest retail figures, there was an unexpected increase. They were expecting a decrease, but there's an unexpected increase in retail sales. Now, if you look at the detail, then there were some underlying elements to that. So, for example, things like alcohol sales were up in supermarkets instead of people going out. So there was a slight, shift in a reflection of people's shopping habits. So I'm not saying that, actually it's all fine and people are still buying exactly the same way that they were before. People are still buying. They are being cautious with their money, but they are still spending money. And I think the risk, if we tell ourselves that nobody's buying and nobody is buying from me or anybody I know, is that we allow ourselves to use that as the answer to why sales are tough. And it's something that was really drummed into me in the retail industry. And the sort of corporate retail industry had a lot of really super toxic traits. And as somebody who spent 17 years in that industry, one of the things that it would do, one of the sort of the hardest elements of almost whichever company I worked for, to be honest, was that they really liked to assign blame. So it was almost like if sales were tough, then you had to almost work out whose fault it was. So that is the kind of the extreme that we don't want to go to. You don't want to spend time being like, okay, well, how did I mess up? How did I do this wrong? How did I really mess up this time? Why did I make that stupid decision? That's not what I'm talking about. But equally, as much as I was not a fan of that, and once you've had to write a report for the umpteenth time explaining how your team made a mistake that could have been done better, even if what you did was the best information that you had at the time. The flip side of that is that it meant that you were never able to just say, for example, to your board of directors, people just aren't really buying stuff right now. That was never an acceptable answer. And you were never allowed to use the weather. That was the other thing. You were never allowed to talk about the weather, and you weren't really allowed to talk about the overall the macroeconomic factors impacting people's purchasing, which was really tough because, when you work for a stationery company and Amazon launch a huge push on their back to school products, and the exact same products that you would sell seem like they're having a harder time, but you're not allowed to even mention the other company, then that can feel pretty tough too. What it's really about is getting that balance. It's not letting yourself off the hook by saying, well, people aren't buying, because people are buying, and they are buying from small businesses, and they're buying online, and they're buying via e-commerce, and they're buying in stores as well. If you feel very defeated and say to yourself, well, nobody's buying, then I think that is a narrative which can lead you to maybe not push or not explore as much as you might possibly explore otherwise. So if nothing else, after listening to this podcast, if you could just ask yourself, if I put this to one side, if I put the cost of living crisis, the war in Ukraine, everything else that's happening in the world right now, economic uncertainty, if I put that to one side, what actually can I also look at in my business? What else can I do? Because there's two types of of factors in any business, in life, in general. There's the things you can control and the things you can't control. You have to recognize when things are out of your control. If you have a big product that you ordered and there's a shipment was held up and you couldn't launch it and that's impacted your sales, then clearly that was something that was out of your control. Although maybe next time you'll build in a longer lead time, for example. If you spend all of your time thinking about the things you can't control, it's actually a really hard place to be with your business, and you have to really focus and take a step back and say, okay, let's put this to one side. People are still buying. They are still spending money. They may not be overall spending as much. Actually, that's not true. As I said, in March, people were spending more than they spent this time last year. It was just partly to do with redistribution of budget and staying home and drinking. So I think important for you to really take a step back and ask yourself, what can I do better? I suppose that's the question I'd really like you to ask yourself, not what's going on around me, but what can I do better? And I think that that's probably why, even though I think big retailers take it to an extreme and it's very difficult psychologically on their teams, I think that's why they always refuse to look at external factors. They only ever wanted to talk about the internal factors. They wanted to talk about what can we do better? So that is the question I'd like you to ask yourself. What can I do better? Where is there room for improvement? Because if we're really honest with ourselves as business owners, I for sure know that there are times when I think, oh, this launch didn't work as well as I'd like, or this didn't happen as well in the way that I wanted it to. And then when I really honestly ask myself, did I put the time and effort into this that I could have done? Did I do everything I could have done? It's very, very rare. And I'd be interested to hear from anyone who feels like that they honestly can say that they have done absolutely everything that they can think of and more, and thought of some unexpected options and done those too, and really put themselves, gone flat out for something and it hasn't worked. If that's your case, then come talk to me. I'd love to talk to you. But a lot of the time when I talk to people, what happens is they sort of say, well, yeah, it's not working, but things aren't selling so well right now. And I say, well, other things you could have done better. And then there's always things that they're like, oh yes, well, absolutely. I know for a fact that I haven't been showing up on social media, or I know for a fact that I need to sort out my email marketing, or I know for a fact that I was disorganized and I didn't get this done in time, or I didn't spend as much time as I wanted it to. So I think there are always things that we can do in our business better. And it's just so much more productive to ask yourself, what can I do better, than to just feel so stuck. And also, just as I said, it's also really hard. And this is a phenomenon that several people have talked to me about, is again, if you're in a small business group or you have friends who run businesses, it's almost like everyone gets into this mindset and then everyone starts talking repeatedly about how things are so bad, and it can be quite sort of damaging for your mindset. If you have to take a little step back, or just even take a little bit of time to regroup and refocus, ask yourself, what can you do better? There's several podcasts where I've talked about the different ways that you can drive sales. So I talk about things like getting more people to come and all of the different things that can cover, from PR to SEO to social media, direct marketing, mailing, things like that. Getting people to spend more every time they come and offering bundles and looking at those elements. Getting more people to buy when they do come, so looking at your conversion, and getting people to come back more frequently, so looking at your loyalty. So there's generally speaking, in any small business, hundreds and hundreds of different things that we can be doing to generate sales and to really push our businesses forward. So if you're feeling stuck, again, just come back to the question, what can I be doing? What can I do better? And be honest with yourself. If you haven't been showing up, or you haven't been doing all the different things that you can be doing, then just ask yourself, all right, where am I going to start? Let's pick one. Let's do this. So I think that that's really important. I think also, though, equally to recognize that one of the other big themes that comes up a lot is that people will talk to me about Instagram, and people will either be really angry about it. So people will talk about how they hate it now, or they don't feel like it's for them anymore, and they hate the changes, and they feel really angry about the fact that the video content is being prioritized and they don't feel comfortable doing video content. they feel really angry about the amount of time that they're spending on it, or they feel really almost like down and betrayed by Instagram about the fact that it's changed and the fact that they are no longer able to get the same results that they got before. And I read a very interesting post last week from Amy on Studio Cotton, who's been on the podcast before, who's really fabulous. I definitely recommend giving her a follow. Her content is so useful and so perceptive and really helpful for small businesses. And what she was saying was that Instagram, ultimately, it's not even necessarily a super effective sales tool in as much as driving sales. So social media traffic that comes to your website typically converts at 0.8%. That means that you have to have, a huge number of people coming to you have to have over 100 people coming to your website to get one sale, whereas the standard is more like 2%. And then email traffic, so sending people to your website from your emails, that converts at around 4%, so 5 times better than social media. So even in the sort of heyday of Instagram, then it was not a great sales channel. And Amy's point was, it's a great marketing. Okay, so it's more about marketing, about raising awareness. And there's lots of other things that you can do to drive awareness, and there's lots of other things that you can do to drive sales. So again, if Instagram is not as effective for you as it was, then really just thinking about what else can I do? Because ultimately it's a free tool, it's free to use, although obviously you can pay to get better reach. But I think that it's just a reminder to really think about how much time and effort you're putting into it compared to your sales, and then what else can you be looking at? And are you doing enough for your customers? There are already people in your business who want to buy from you. There are people who have purchased from you before. So make sure that you are taking the time to really look after them. I've spoken again about this a lot in previous podcasts, but I just think it's worth remembering that in the sort of pursuit of more sales, don't forget about the people who've already purchased from you. These times are, dare I say it, I try not to say it, unprecedented. And this year, as much as any other year in the last couple of years. So product businesses are driven by great product. If things aren't working as well, take it back to your customer, take it back to your product. Is it as strong as it can be? Can it be better? How can you make it better? And by better, I mean better suited for your customer. So is it really, really desirable to them? What else could you do to test new things, to experiment, to put new ideas in front of your customers? You cannot cost cut your way out of a sales slump, I don't believe. I think that cutting your costs is really important, especially at a time when everything's getting more expensive. Being really aware of your numbers is really important. But the only thing that I've ever seen that has really re-energized a product business is the product. So if you're feeling like it's tough right now, then again, has your customer moved on? Are you still offering them the same things that you were offering last year? Are you able to try new things, to try different ways of communicating with your customer, different ways of connecting with them, and just offering them something different and new? It is hard because it's tiring, and it's often, if sales are tough, it's not hugely financially rewarding for you as a business owner. So it is really hard to keep going. But I think that you have to, because the more time you spend stuck in the elements that you can't control, the harder it is going to be for you to move forward and focus on the things that you can control. And you can control the product for sure. That is one of the biggest things that you can control, and one of the best ways of re-energizing if you feel like you've hit a bit of a sales slump. So take a look at the product, ask yourself, is it new enough? Is it good enough? And by new, I'm not saying you constantly have to be bringing in loads of new stock, because you know that I'm all about keeping your stock under control as well. But what can you experiment with? I think that every product business should have about 20% of at least 20% of their range is just like throw it at the wall and see what sticks. Experimental, something that doesn't quite fit the mold of what you've done before, something that helps you get a vision of how you can move the business forward and what else you can do with it. Because that's how businesses evolve and grow. They try new things, they see what the customers like, and they work from that. So again, if you're feeling stuck, focus in on what you can do. Stay close to your customer. That is so, so important. If you're not sure at any point what to do, bring it back to your customer. What does your customer need from you right now? Constantly ask yourself that question and ultimately keep going. And then the final thing I want to say, which is, I just don't know if we talk about this enough in the small business community, but I think the other thing to say is that if you are just really struggling in terms of making it all work, then it's a huge amount of pressure on a new business or even a business that's been running for a little while, that when the sales aren't where you want them to be, it's a huge amount of pressure if that is your primary source of income. And I think it puts business owners into a huge amount of stress when they know that they have to cover all of their bills from their business. And then it means that you're much more likely to get panicked if that's the situation. So if that is the case with your business, or if you even just need a break for a little while on everything that you've got, all the finances dependent on the business, then I don't think as a small business community, we talk enough about sometimes you have to supplement your income. Sometimes it's actually the best thing for your business is to take on some extra work if you can, or extra hours, or some people freelance, some people work part-time. Whatever's available for you, then I don't think that there should ever be any shame in that. And I've spoken to a few people who felt completely defeated because they'd got to a certain point in their business and then they were just struggling with cash flow and struggling with sales. And it was just so stressful. And in the end, they went and they got supplemental income. And I just think that it's terrible, really, that sort of the ideal of running your own business, we don't allow there to be different models. And it is never a failure for you to recognize what you need to do financially. And I think, to be honest, for a lot of people who do end up doing this, it can actually be one of the best things that happens for their business, because the minute that you no longer have to use it to cover every single bill, then it takes some of the pressure off and it allows you to start to be a little bit more creative and have a little bit more fun. Because ultimately, if we didn't start our businesses to do more of the things that we enjoyed, then why did we start them? And having fun with your business, I think, is really important. Like, what's a fun thing to do? What's a fun element of running a business? What would make you feel really proud or really positive about it? I think those are questions I ask myself, and I encourage people in the club and people who've done my January challenge for planning your year. That's one of the questions I asked, what's a fun goal to have for your business? And I think that there should be an element of fun in business. And if you are in a situation where it feels like you may have to take supplemental income, then I'd celebrate that. Celebrate that you recognize that and that that's something that you can do, rather than feel like it's some kind of failure, because it also may not be permanent. It may be that you do that and then the business, you try these other things and the business builds up again, and then you can move forward and maybe that'll shift again. Who knows? But don't be ashamed if that's the move that you end up making. I think as well, the other thing to say is that it's almost like you have to look at 2022 as a completely separate year from previous years. So if you've had tactics and strategies that worked in 2020, you just have to let go of the fact that they may not be the ones that work in 2022. So, for example, when I've spoken to people who saw huge growth in their business through ads in 2020 and you've just never been able to replicate that, you are not alone if that's the situation you're in. But this is the opportunity for you to relook at your organic growth, your organic engagement, really focusing on your loyalty and retention, and try something different and try something new. So I hope that was a bit of a pep talk. I'd love to hear what you thought of today's episode, if that resonated at all. Why not come over and see me on Instagram at Resilient Retail Club, say hi, share a photo of where you're watching as well, where you're listening rather. I always love to see that. It's always so fun. If you have a moment to rate and review the podcast, that would be amazing. In iTunes, you can rate and review, and in Spotify, you can rate it in the app. And of course, if you hit subscribe or follow the podcast, you'll be the first to hear about each new episode. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.